So thank you for your patience. This is officially the first video that I'm posting, the first asynchronous class that we're having here at K this quarter. And in this video, I would like to discuss how we study economics. So in class, we already discussed what the study of economics is all about. We discussed why it's important. And we're going to ask the third big question in this video, which is how we study it. And as we'll cover here in a little bit, because economics is a science, it's a social science, but still a science, we're going to use the scientific method as a way to generate knowledge in this field and come to understand the world around us. So before I get into discussing that topic, because this is the first video, I want to introduce a feature which is going to be common to all videos that you're going to view as a part of this class, which is a feature I like to call, why do you need to know this? And this is just my way of trying to motivate the learning and to tell you why I think it's important for this class, for your professional lives, and for the world around us. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what that means. So these three questions are going to be the same for every topic. Obviously, the answers will differ. And I'd like to take the time to go through each of these for every topic as well. So why do you need to know how the scientific method is applied in economics in the professional world? How is this going to help you professionally? And I think that you need to have an appreciation for the use of the scientific method in business analytics, in the corporate world, in economics, because you are going to be required to perform some sort of analysis as a part of those jobs. And so better understanding the relationships between variables, predicting outcomes, and to do good analysis, you're going to need to use a scientific method or a condensed or implicit form of it. And bad analysis, so the failure to perform the scientific method to create that good analysis, leads to bad outcomes. And bad outcomes in the professional world could be loss of revenue or profits, or come at a cost to a client and could eventually get you fired. When we think about the larger world and society, we need to understand how the scientific method is applied to economics as it relates to creating policy. And that's because while we could eventually derive the same answer to a policy question, for example, what to set the minimum wage at, how much we should invest in subsidizing solar energy, we could find the right answer to those questions by trial and error, by investing a little bit, then a little bit more, dialing it back if we think we overshoot. The problem is that trial and error takes more time. And if these are really important questions that are life and death questions, which they could be, then the time that we're waiting to find that right answer is coming at a cost of lives, where if we would implement it earlier, we'd be able to save more lives and have a more efficient policy. So I think this really is an important issue. And you need to understand how the scientific method applies to economics to succeed in this class, because it's going to motivate why we learn the different models that we cover in this class. We're going to go over 4 or 5 very integral and important models, and without this motivation, they may just seem like memorizing statistics or memorizing just random facts, right? And so we're going to do our best to motivate them and place them in context here. So as we discussed in our synchronous class, economics actually was originally a branch of philosophy, where we studied how humans make decisions in the face of scarcity by relying only on logic and anecdotal examples. Now, however, economics really is much more of a science, and graduate school in economics, if you want to go on to become a professional economist, really is basically just graduate school in applied mathematics. It's a ton of math. Now, this image that I have here isn't perfect, but I think it does a decent job of contextualizing economics as a science. So what's important to understand is that modern economics is not some sort of mysticism or voodoo or just separate from all these other disciplines. It's actually closely related and similar to other sciences, just with one critical difference, which we'll actually cover momentarily. So the last thing I want to say about this image is that I'm a little bit skeptical about whether you could consider history or law actually a social science. And I don't think you need to really separate international from micro and macroeconomics, but that's the only disclaimer I wanted to make. Otherwise, I think it does a good job showing the relationship between economics and something like medicine or biology. All right, so hopefully this image and these steps look familiar, perhaps from a middle school science class or your science fair project. So what I'd like to do now is to compare how the scientific method works in the natural sciences and in life sciences, and how it works in economics. And hopefully there we'll see some of the similarities between how knowledge is generated in economics and in other sciences. All right, so this is an image that I found to summarize the steps of how research is conducted in medicine, specifically with regard to cancer research. And so I want to apply those 6 steps that we had in the previous image to this process and see how they apply. So first, we want to ask a question in the scientific method. And in this image, this is basically your observe situation. So through personal and clinical and scientific experience, you see this problem in the world. You notice that a particular type of cancer is developing and you want to improve the world by getting rid of it. You ask, how do we cure, how do we treat that form of cancer? I'm going to come back to the second step, so I'm not going to cross it off for now. But the rest of these are pretty straightforward. So we can form a hypothesis as step 3, and we clearly see that as the next step here in the cancer research. So when it comes to medical research, that hypothesis is formed off of your understanding both of previous research and of a model of how cells and different components of the body operate, how different systems operate. So we need a model there to understand what would happen in response to a particular treatment. After you form your hypothesis, obviously you test it. In medicine, this is often conducted through clinical trials or randomized controlled trials, however you want to think of that. And once the tests are conducted, you analyze the data and conclude. So those steps are combined here in this conclusion step. And it's implied with this little blue arrow that goes back from conclude to hypothesize, that's the background research. That's how knowledge is borrowed or used from previous work, is that it then informs a new hypothesis. And I think that's probably a good way of thinking about the scientific method applied to cancer research and to medicine in general.